This is Kasper, and this is also Kasper, full name Kasper Russel-Poplar. He was once an aspiring Pokemon trainer, but tragically died during his destiny. However, he was not the first. So before we talk about his life, let's talk about before the whole Fire vs. Water storyline came to be. However, there doesn't seem to be much. But like most characters on the alternate channel, Kasper was among those animated after a questionable animation, although he was given a backstory that is exceptionally screwed. All we do know is that Kasper is the biological son of a Pokemon biologist and ranger named Clementine Russel, and his stepfather is Alcatraz Poplar. Kasper's real father is never mentioned, nor is he revealed. Kasper loved the professor and wanted to be a Pokemon trainer when he grew up, and got that wish for Christmas, and the rest is history. Although his backstory and name are similar to Kasper the Friendly Ghost, there are some things that stand out. Kasper the Friendly Ghost died from pneumonia as a kid, at least in the 90s movie. But in the original series he was actually born a ghost. Kasper the Gengar would have died in the snow, except he didn't. He was murdered upon being kidnapped. Specifics of that will be outlined soon. Stepping away from the backstory, for now at least, Kasper's design is simplistic. According to his human design, he is an African American toddler. The only clothes that we could see him wear were a black shirt and overalls. He doesn't have much of a unique design as a Gengar. Kasper is voiced by me, as well as a handful of other characters. In fact, his voice is the exact same as Chase's Charmander form. Now, Kasper initially debuts in Chase Goes to School, but chronologically, he appears in the remake of the third Fire vs. Water novel, The Truth. In the story, he meets a grave robber named Heathcliff Lockwood, and we see a part of the story through his perspective in the Golden Grapes music video. Kasper at first warns Heathcliff that his job is very dangerous, but then he negotiates and helps him find a grave of a person he didn't like. Later on in the story, he helps Heathcliff live after he was shot by a cop, warned him about bears, and at some point sees Heathcliff digging up his grave. Kasper urges Heathcliff to move his body from the graveyard to the professor's old mansion, which explains why Kasper lives there. Kasper also appears in Fire vs. Water 4 Regional Perspective, where he comforts Pinky and other prisoners during the war. He carefully guides them all, but sadly left them behind on the last battle. Why? We'll find out later. Kasper's age is hard to determine actually. He was 6 years old when he died. Since his death it had been 6 years, as the recent Fire vs. Water story took place in 2025. So what I'm saying is Kasper's age as a human is 6 years old, but as a Gengar he's also 6 years old. So that would make him around the same age as other kids of the Fire vs. Water storyline, like 11 or 12. His birthday's never been revealed, so let's just go with that. Anyway, Kasper may or may not be sadistic. He reacts differently when watching people die. He clearly smiles watching a fire team grunt, which we find out is Ed in Fire vs. Water 3, turn the gun on himself, and in Ghost of the Night Tide, where he smiles yet again, crushing other members sneaking into the cult's secret building. And then in Fire vs. Water 5, after Kelly and other anti-Pokemon cult members all die from the Necronomicon's power, Kasper and Marcus laugh at their demise. But that's mostly because they don't know that mortals can't read Necronomicons and only Ghost-type Pokemon can. Now you could argue that Kasper's smile is his default reaction, but it clearly changes in other scenes. However, in the second to last chapter in Fire vs. Water 3, he begged Heathcliff not to blow himself up, but fails. And in the unedited voice line, Kasper gasps and hyperventilates after Heathcliff's death.
Wait, no!
Regarding relationships, Kasper appears to be the guardian angel of most of the characters of the Fire vs. Water lore. He's mostly protective towards Chase, Pinky, Toby, and his own best friend Marcus. The latter is because they are both best friends. Inseparable even. Yeah. He and Marcus are prominently seen in teasers for Fire vs. Water content after the release of Fire vs. Water 4. In fact, Marcus debuted in the remastered version of Chase Goes to School. But that's not to say that Kasper loves everyone. He obviously hates his own killer and tried to kill him as revenge. Instead, he cursed the cult and didn't go to heaven to make sure that the cult was dead for good. It seemed that he tried protecting Heathcliff out of all soldiers on the fire team, but that didn't work. Speaking of death, Kasper knows a lot about souls and how they work basically. According to Fire vs. Water 3, he mentions that souls linger if a body is not put to rest, respectfully. This is similar to a myth circulating in the Vietnam culture, and the Americans used it against the Viet Cong during the Vietnam War. Back to the subject. Kasper also mentions that if a person is respectfully buried, they'll have a chance of going to heaven. But it doesn't seem to be accurate, considering that he stayed to talk to Heathcliff before he died. And this was after Heathcliff buried Kasper's body outside of the professor's home. So I guess that's all there is to talk about. Let's just summarize the main events. Kasper is first introduced in Chase Goes to School, which takes place in 2025. However, his backstory is revealed before the Firewater Civil War. Sometime around 2013, Kasper is born to a Pokemon ranger, but an unknown father. Around 2018-2019, Kasper meets his stepfather, Professor Alcatraz Poplar. On Christmas of 2019, he gets his first Pokeball and sneaks out to find Pokemon, breaking his parents' rules. He gets lost, meets Gabe Alphonse, who gives him a ride to his home saying that he had Pokemon. Alphonse led Kasper to the basement where he shoots him. That night, Kasper's body is disposed of in a lake and his soul morphs into a Gengar. Later on in the night, Kasper wanders around until he sees Gabe attending a cult, to which Kasper haunts, causing a flood, hoping they would drown. Unfortunately, most of the attendants survive, including Gabe, Kelly, Baker, and Heathcliff. Near the end of December 2019, Kasper presumably attends his own funeral to find out that the cult he tried killing off is a big deal. He finds out Marcus is there and comforts him later that night. He asks for him and Esperanza to keep Pokemon safe at all costs. Eventually, he finds out that his parents are divorced, and that his mother fled the region for safety, and that his stepfather tries to find all Pokemon. All he could find were shiny Chespin, Quilladin, and Chestnut. Sometime around January 2020, Kasper is most likely responsible for Geo's premonition spells during the events of Maternal Bonds. He doesn't seem to do much during the war, except spy on the fire team within the headquarters and comfort prisoners of war. In February, he meets Heathcliff Lockwood, a thief who robs graves every month on the fire team site. In hopes of getting him to leave, Kasper leads Heathcliff to the grave of Richard Donald's father, whose casket was made of gold. In March, Kasper finds out Heathcliff and his friends returned, especially with police surrounding the cemetery. Heathcliff is shot in the leg, and Kasper keeps him alive. He is most likely responsible for attracting bears in the dead of night in hopes of killing Heathcliff, but he ends up shooting them all. In April, Heathcliff returns to the cemetery for the last time, robbing Kasper's grave. Kasper admits that he's the ghost of the kid Heathcliff's boss murdered. As a promise to leave Heathcliff and the fire team alone, Kasper asks him to relocate his grave near the professor's mansion. Near the end of the Firewater Civil War, he finds out Marcus is killed and eventually reincarnates to a Marshadow to help defeat the fire team. They both scare Kelly, who was about to do dirty things to Pinky. Kasper comforts Pinky for a while, and he joins Marcus to play in a battlefield scene in the Neon Dreams video. On the last battle, Kasper finds out that Heathcliff is going to end his life, but he begs him to rethink his actions. Unfortunately, Heathcliff proceeded to set himself on fire and blow himself up with a grenade. To make matters worse, Kasper lured his stepfather in the prison on the last battle, which ends up getting him killed, and his death leads to the death of Chester Alcatraz, Jack's father. Kasper comforted Pinky, Toby, and Emolga and Rockruff, who are trapped underground of the fire team's headquarters, but left after watching the many deaths. He and Marcus watched all of the events of the war and both walked away in shame, but at some point Marcus goes back home to find his parents dead. Kasper comforts him after finding out. And to tease remastered versions of Starter Rescue and Chase Moves In, Kasper is most likely responsible for enrolling Pinky to Poplar Elementary. In Chase Goes to School, Kasper tries to pull a prank on Chase, but finds out that he's Chase Suta, who went missing after the Firewater Civil War. He takes the blame for an embarrassing moment in class, then spends most of his time with Chase after school. He specifically tells Chase the story of how he became a Gengar, and revealed that he would have been Jack's trainer. When Chase gets beat up, Kasper possesses Chase's mind to get him to talk to Hunter and to keep him alive. Kasper and Pinky team up to avenge Jack after Kasper admits to cursing her and many others in school because of Jack. They warm up by removing the cage that keep the hamsters. Then Kasper glues Jack to the ground while Pinky forces him down as well. When Jack gets knocked out, Kasper possesses his mind to get him to talk to his dad, who is not happy with him hurting Chase. Later on, Kasper learns more about the Firewater Civil War from Eddie, who spends the night over at his place, and apparently the only bathroom he has is a bottomless pit full of demons called the Hole Hole. And no, that is not how they are fed. That night, Kasper possessed Jack's mind again so that he and his dad could talk some more. Chester reveals that Kasper and Jack are technically brothers, and Jack has been treating him poorly. And also Jack doesn't know much about the Firewater Civil War, which starts a sequence which was discussed beforehand. He also stays to watch Jack listen to the tapes provided by Chester. By the end of the last tape, Chester urges Jack to be a good kid and never forget him, and then he listens to a condolence tape from Mr. Park. After spring break, Kasper doesn't agree with Chase on bringing Jack back to school, but Pinkie teleports her anyway. Kasper is obviously confused and tries to comprehend how she was capable of doing so. By the end of class, he defends Geo from getting bullied by It's a Bully. He scares him so hard that he probably seeks therapy in Fire vs. Water 5. During the class of 2025 graduation, Gabe Alphonse as a Chandelure tries to haunt and kill everyone in the ceremony, but Professor Poplar and many other souls kill him. The region's government orders a mandated exorcism across the entire area, which leads to Kasper being kidnapped and his mansion being on lockdown. His mansion was used as a residence for the red guy in Fire vs. Water 5, which we find out is Kelly Bartlett. When Coach Elson, Pinkie, Jack, Geo, Vincent, Lancer, and Ralze are kidnapped and sent to the Ghost-type confinement base, they find out that Kasper is still alive. Most of the souls captured were unfortunately exorcised, and Kasper was scheduled to be next. Pinkie teleported herself and Kasper out of the base and finally to the Chester Alcatraz subway. Kasper and Marcus then possess a train to control it and send it to Francisco Poplar's estate, which crashes and explodes, but thankfully everyone survives, except for the train. When the team confront Red Guy, Kasper demands that he gives up, but realize they're outnumbered. When Red Guy tries to exorcise and kill the Pokemon with the Necronomicon, he gets sucked in. It was a fake. Near the end, Pico barges in from a helicopter and joins the cast, along with the Tankman, Team Fortress 2 Mercs, Jevil, Sans, Baldy, and Golden Freddy. Kasper finds out that the real Necronomicon is written in a language known to Ghost-type Pokemon, and if a human tried reading it, they would die. Kasper and Marcus use it to their advantage and stage a defeat towards Red Guy. Kasper urges everyone to keep their eyes shut once Red Guy starts reading. Everyone else, except for Kasper, Pico's team, Marcus, and Eddie hide back in the mine when Red Guy opens the true Necronomicon. And like I said, since the Mimikyu wrote the entirety of the book, its language is indecipherable to humans and unfit for their mentality once they open it, which kills every villain. And finally, Kasper laughs at Red Guy's demise and helps plan a final challenge for Vincent, Playtime, and Marcus. However, to tease part 4, something will happen to Kasper and Marcus. Is it a good thing? We can only hope. Okay, that should be it. Let me know in the comments below which character to summarize next, and I'll get to it soon. Thanks for watching.